Good morning, everyone. My name is Eddie Oldfield with Quest. I'm a senior lead for projects. I work with Quest on a number of initiatives, including this one funded by the New Brunswick Environmental Trust Fund in collaboration with Deco Design. Our main presenter today is Danielle Savard, a registered professional planner. And this is the third session in a series of training webinars that will conclude with an exercise in February. So we do hope that you'll join us again. Today's session will be focusing on the topic of integrating gray and green infrastructure into land use planning projects. Next slide, please. For today, as I have introduced Danielle, our main presenter, I'd also like to introduce my colleague Helda Renian, who is based out west and helping to support the session today. For everyone who's joined us, if you wish, you can introduce yourself in the chat. You can also ask any questions throughout the session, and we will moderate a discussion at the end of the 1 hour webinar for your questions with Danielle. If you're not speaking, please leave yourself on mute. And so with that, I'd like to turn it now to our main presenter, Danielle.
Thank you, Eddie. I'm going to start, with the goal with this training. My goal is still the same that it was in session 1 and session 2. It's for you, decision makers, visionary people, leaders, to become the heroes of the events you have to face. And I'm aiming here at helping you to adopt the implementation of the energy efficient measures and sustainability principles and concepts to help you to implement projects that respect the environment, respond to practically all social and energy efficiency issues your community have to face, and of course, reaching the healthy revenues that will help you to offer sustainable and energy efficient development projects and appropriate services for people who live in your projects. Okay, now, through this training, you have noticed under session 1 and the session 2, we were referring to a sustainable approach that is called sustainable community design. There are other approaches, but we believe that this approach can help you to respond practically to all issues your populations may have with developments, including energy efficient measures, integrate projects that will allow you to respond to climate change, offer affordable housing, and also having affordable communities in your area. And of course, increasing your revenues with the development. As Eddie has mentioned, we are on session 3. The first session, just a recall, is the one with the framework. It's called Building Sustainable Developments by Integrating Energy Efficiency in Projects. It's recorded, it's available, and it's on the Quest website, and I'm sure that Eddie can make it available to people that are attending this session today. The second session was in October, and we were talking about creating affordable communities and housing. And today we're going to focus more on integrating gray and green infrastructure. And we're going to take a pause after that for Christmas to go, and we're going to restart in January with another session of information that is going to be protecting the natural environment and providing the best return on your investments. And we're going to wrap it up in February by taking all the information that we received so far, all the design information we received, and we're going to have a practical exercise where it's going to help you to implement yourself a project in your community that is going to help you. It's going to be the workshop that is going to help you to do something like that. Okay, that being said, who am I? Some of you know me, but for those of you that don't know me, I'm president of my own company, Deco Design. I'm a registered professional planner from the Canadian Institute of Planners, and I work here in New Brunswick. I have a master's degree in business administration and one also in urban planning. I have more than 35 years of experience in planning with specialization in sustainability in the private, public, and NGO sector. And I received from the Gulf of Maine Council a visionary award for the implementation of the approach that we're talking about at Le Village-en-Haut-du-Ruisseau in Dieppe in New Brunswick here. And I'm still a senior associate with Quest. Okay, so we're going to start with this session, and imagine that the first session, it was really the framework. One piece of the puzzle was creating affordable communities and housing. Another piece of the puzzle is going to be integrating gray and green infrastructure. Okay. When we talk about community projects, of course, we talk about integrating with that the gray infrastructure, but we have to ask ourselves, can it be linked really to green infrastructure in order to create these energy efficient community projects? And we're going to look today at some of the elements that deal with transportation, sewage systems, stormwater management, parks, and green space, and the integration of design elements. As you can imagine, we're just going to have a kind of overview because we don't have enough time in front of us. So I would like me to finish my talking around 12:45. Okay. Now, if we start with the gray infrastructure and with transportation, in session 2, we were mentioning that transportation is creating roughly about 25% of greenhouse gas emission, and land use activities about 25%. And if you look at Stats Canada, when they provide information about that, they don't really talk about design, how one can influence the other one. Another piece of information that is important to understand, every liter of gas we consume adds 2.4 kilogram of greenhouse gas emission to our atmosphere. And in New Brunswick, in 2013 information, we had 350,000 homes and buildings that were producing at the time 1.2 metric ton per year. That is roughly about 3.4 ton per building per year. And the greenhouse gas emission, yes, it's going down in Canada. In 2020, it was 672 metric ton of CO2, and New Brunswick is roughly around 2% of that. 12.4 metric ton. They did better than what they were aiming at for 2020. And per capita in New Brunswick, we're talking about 16 ton per capita, and in Canada, about 18 tons per capita. Okay. When people talk about greenhouse gas emission and governments in general, when we talk to them about reducing greenhouse gas emission, of course, they're going to focus on something like carbon content and vehicle efficiency. But as we mentioned in session 2, imagine that it's a three-legged stool. And two of the tools, yes, vehicle efficiency, carbon content, but ask yourself this question. If car and fuel standards increase by 40%, and vehicle kilometers traveled increased by 2% per year for 20 years, guess what is going to be the result? You're going to see an increase of 12% of greenhouse gas emission because we see more and more people that are using cars, okay? Now, what does it mean? It means that we have to focus on lowering the vehicle kilometers travel in order to have a real impact on greenhouse gas emission and climate change. And here, a way to do that is going to be focusing on compact subdivision with mixed use developments. Okay. Another piece of information that is important to understand, when we talk about going from point A to point B, on average in Canada, the round trip in 1992, it was about 54 minutes. It increased every 5 years, every 10 years. It increased up to 63 minutes in 2005. We don't have any more statistics on that from Stats Canada, but you can just imagine that the roads are getting getting more and more packed. I mean, there's more and more people that are using the same roads. That's what it means. Now, another piece of information that is important for us, working from home in 2022 represented about 20% of people that were working. And there's another 6% that is hybrid. That means home plus the office. It's not as high as we would like. For example, in Australia, it's about 45% of people that are doing something like that. So we have to keep that in mind, and we have to keep also in mind that it's going to have an impact on our commuting patterns. There's a study that was done in 2014 that I found pretty interesting in New Brunswick, and they were saying, okay, in 2011, about 35% were commuting between communities. In Canada, it's about 21%. And it has an impact on also the time. Of course, New Brunswick, the roads are less full of cars than it would be in Canada, because I mean there's less population. We're not really surprised on that. In general, it takes 19 minutes from getting from point A to point B for commuting. In Canada, it's about 25%. So we're doing better than in Canada. Carpooling is higher in New Brunswick, but you have also to consider the transit system. The transit system in New Brunswick is only 2%. And in Canada, it's 13%. A lot of people are saying that the transit system is only for the more urbanized areas. And to a certain extent, they're right. But it means that here in New Brunswick, we're going to put more emphasis on carpooling. Of course, car ownership is going to be higher in New Brunswick, and also the budget for transportation, because you own a car, is going to be higher in New Brunswick than it would be in Canada. Active transportation, because we're very often in our car versus other people in New Brunswick and in Canada, we walk less and we bike less. Okay, put it that way. Now that we have an understanding of a bit more where we're going with commuting patterns, we should keep in mind that we shouldn't sell metal, but we should sell mobility. And the research has shown that there are technological trends that are converging in private vehicle market, and they promise a lot of things, these guys. They're promising, for example, the in-vehicle connectivity, and it means reducing accident and anticipating traffic congestion. Okay. The research also shown that electrification should be everywhere, especially in Europe. I mean, they have in Europe, for example, every new or refurbished house is going to be equipped with e-vehicle charging station. They're pushing about that. Here in Canada, we're not at that point already. And car sharing, they are saying that it's something that we should consider for our settlements, and research have shown that it's reducing cars on the road, reducing also our need on street or off-street parking, and it's going to lower the cost by 30 to 60% versus auto ownership. And here it's kind of easy to understand that if you don't own a car, it's going to be less expensive for you. Now, autonomous driving, the research has shown that it's supposed to reduce road lane width, and it will have also an impact on restricting the number of passengers permitted when newly licensed drivers. Okay, we're going to look at that. And we're going also to think about e-hailing, peer-to-peer ride services, Uber, Lyft, name it. I mean, whatever type of organization. I heard people telling me, this is only an urban issue. It's not a rural issue. But what we're seeing more and more, the urban issues is also coming to the rural areas. And it's going to be the trend that we're going to see in the years to come. Okay. Now, We should also ask a question. Is it the solution to have electrification for all the cars? There is a study that has been done in Germany, and I found it pretty interesting in what they were talking about. They were talking about sustainable urban transport, and they called it ASI, avoid, shift, improve. And they talk of something like that. First of all, when you start, you should always look at how you're going to live, how far do you have to go for services, for going to work. And basically here they're talking about smart infrastructure planning, reducing the need for traveling, and they call it avoid and reduce. Basically, I mean, they talk here about design of your settlement. When you have no other choice except to use a mode of transportation from point A to point B, they said, okay, we should choose the mode of transportation, and the one that we should encourage should be non-motorized, or it could be a transit system versus the individual car. When you have no other choice except to have a car, now the third decision is coming, which is which type of vehicle are you going to use, and also are you going to have fuel efficiency in your vehicle at this point. Have you noticed, I mean, one thing is a sequence here. They always say, start with the design of your subdivision first, because it's going to have a huge impact on the mode of transportation you're going to promote in your community. Now, when we look at what is already in place in our community, and I mean, this is the picture that you see here. It's an abandoned a mall that was built in the 80s, and there has been a lot of these malls across North America that have been built that have been with nobody that is using it, and they went bankrupt. And basically now, I mean, you have a vacant area where you don't know what to do with it. And what they have done in Belmar Lakeview in Colorado, it's what it's called a lifestyle center. So you go from something that was focusing on cars and bath to something where they're building now residential units where the services and the activities are in an area where you don't have to use your individual car, or you're going to use it at the least amount of possible of time when you go to have when you go for an activity or you go to work. Now you're going to ask the question, is there any example here in Canada? There's one that's called Faubourg Boisbriand. It's in the northern part of Montreal. It's the old Hyundai vehicle plant that was abandoned at one point, and they were using that area in order to refurbish the area. And it's a lead ND project. It's on 25 hectares, I'm sorry. And everything is close by. You can walk, you can bike. They have even, I mean, the light trains, it's what they were saying, that is going to come, and it's going to link downtown Montreal to this area. There's underground parking, all utilities underground, indigenous species for vegetation. But I was looking also at the commercial activities all around, and the link is not as good as it could be because they're still talking about big box retail stores. It could have been better linked that way, but I mean, it's an improvement compared to what we have seen over and over again with the conventional. Now, when you look at commuting patterns and you look at the time it takes to go from point A to point B, Stats Canada was telling us on average, if you're going to take the transit system, it's going to take you about 31 minutes from point A to point B. Now, if you use your car, because there are so many cars on the road, well, it's going to take you 19 minutes. It's going to be a bit cumbersome, but you're going to get there before the bus system, for example. Now, the best way to go from point A to point B in an urbanized area would be by biking or walking, active transportation, basically. And there's a new trend that has come, it's e-biking. And e-biking is so important right now that last year, they got more e-bikes that were sold around the world than any type of bikes. So it means that it's going to be less than 14 minutes to get from point A to point B. However, communities should keep in mind that they should regulate how these bikes go, because if they go on the sidewalk and they hit people and pedestrians, well, I mean, there's another issue. Now, some of the characteristics that we have seen with commuting patterns, more population in the region is going to have longer to get to work, which should be surprising because you have more people, I mean, that are moving around. Low density is also less conducive to public transit, and higher density is more active modes of transportation or transit that are possible in your area. We're going to talk here, and we're going to aim with this training at 7 units per acre. And there is a good reason why we focus so much on 7 units per acre. If you want to justify to have a transit system that has a frequency of 45 minutes, you really need to have at least 7 units per acre that are going to be built in your subdivision. And eventually, you can have, even in your more rural areas, the possibility of thinking maybe a transit system can come in 50 years or 100 years. I mean, you always think way ahead where you can go with that. Longer commute, of course, is going to create higher stress and lower satisfaction with work-life relationship. Now, with transit-oriented development, there's a study that was done in the States where they mentioned that 50% of all the trips in the States are 3 kilometers or less, okay? In Canada, I couldn't find the information, but I wouldn't be surprised it's about the same. So depending if you're going to use your car, which is going to increase the greenhouse gas emission, or an active transportation, you're going to have more or less impact on climate change and greenhouse gas emission. Now, when you have more possibilities of going around, it's what we call a location efficient area. And there's a piece of information that I found very interesting where they were saying people who live in a more compact area, transit accessible area, have more choices and transportation choices. Well, we should keep that in mind when we have to build a subdivision that is going to be more compact. Now, when you are also looking at the design of your subdivision from your property, we have also to look at possibilities with streets and trails. And we should look at how we can connect, for example, the streets and trails. Imagine that on your left, you have a subdivision that was built, a conservation subdivision, another one also on the right. And suddenly, there's someone that would like in the middle, would like to link also the streets all together and the green path all together to have a kind of continuity. If you want to lower the traffic, think about T intersection instead of 4-ways intersection. Think about single loading of certain street segments, and especially for what we call sustainable community design that is going to be applied on a property. The green space could be used for septic fields, or it could be used for recreation, and it gives a perspective for your subdivision that is quite amazing, okay? Also avoid long straight segments, use 90-degree or 135 degree bends. It gives you a better perspective of your subdivision, especially if you have a terminal vista that is focusing, your eyes are focusing in an area that gives you a kind of like of your subdivision itself. And of course, using S-shaped reverse curves gives you that impression too when you're driving or when you're walking, how your subdivision could look more attractive that way. Okay, now there's often the question of the right-of-way. And the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure here in New Brunswick, of course, is going to tell you, oh, you need 20 meters. But if you look at literature and if you look at research that has been done to accommodate 2 vehicles in a residential subdivision, you don't need 20 meters. They say that it works really well with 10 to 11 meters to accommodate 2 vehicles for the right-of-way. And you can have also a paved area that is going to be way narrower than what we see. So if it's narrower, you bet that you have less maintenance and you have less snow to remove in the winter, and you have enough space also for the snow shoulder. Okay, that also brings us to the point of walkable and bikeable areas in your subdivision. There's a concept of road diets and complete streets, and we're talking about here of reducing the number of lanes to wider footpaths and sidewalks, wider landscaping strips, cycle lanes on one or both sides of the road, wider lane widths on the remaining traffic lanes, a 2-way turn lane flush traffic median for turning traffic, and a reversible center lane. Basically, imagine that you have a road that is going through a subdivision, and the road is quite large, and you have the cars that are going really fast. And if you put an island in the middle where someone can walk and can cross the street without being hit, first of all, you're going to see the car going slower. And because you're offering also the possibility of having other mode of transportation, biking is possible in the area, you bet me that you're going to see a slower traffic in your residential subdivision. Now, complete street means when you're going to build a street in your subdivision, always think about providing also the service for the bikers, for the pedestrian, and the transit system if it's possible. You can, depending, is it more rural or less rural? Okay. Comes the point where you should ask yourself, do I know the walk score of my community? There's a website, it's called walkscore.com, that is very interesting, and they give you a walk score up to 100. 100 would be heaven for walking or heaven for biking, if we could call it that way. I look at some of the communities in New Brunswick, and well, put it that way, a lot of room for improvement. The highest score that I could see, it was Fredericton for the bike score, that is 49, and the walk score is only 25. So we have a lot of room for improvement for our subdivision if we want to make it more walkable and bikeable. Okay, now, when we are thinking about Generation Y, they are looking for a dream home. It's what research showed. They're looking for a dream lifestyle, and that includes walkable, bikeable, transit-oriented neighborhoods. And we're talking here having mixed of land uses, higher density, more compact, building, fronting, sidewalk, pedestrian scale, roads for mobility, safety, access, and placemaking, and also meeting the needs for pedestrians, bikers, transit people, and people who use their car. There's a link between transportation and immigration, and it's really interesting. That study comes in 2014. It was from UNB that I found very interesting. And these guys were saying in New Brunswick, and you can put them in any jurisdiction, okay, any small jurisdiction, provincial small jurisdiction. We want to have these immigrants in our communities, of course. And after 2 or 3 years, guess where they go? They go to Toronto, they go to Montreal, they go to Ottawa, they go to Vancouver, and they're not in our area. Rarely we ask the question, why? But think about that. I mean, these people, when they come here in Canada, they are not rich. They don't have a lot of money. They're looking for going to their activities or to their work through active transportation, car sharing, transit-oriented neighborhoods. And if the only thing that is offered for them to go from point A to point B in a rural area, it's having your individual car, and they cannot afford it, you bet me that they're going to look for a way to leave that place to live in an area where they can at least afford to go from point A to point B. So the question remains here, how welcoming are you for them? It's very, very important to keep that in mind if you're going to do it in a rural area. Okay, now, and also more urbanized area. Now we're going to do a segue here with sewage, and we're going to talk about the individual septic system and water well. Imagine that you have this line, the property lines here, and the Health Act is talking about 1 acre lot. We have 1 acre lot over there, and you have your septic field that is right over there, and Department of Health is going to say, okay, fine, great, you fit with our regulation. However, think about that. Suppose that you're going to have a conservation subdivision, and you're going to have your lot lines that are going to be a bit different. You didn't change anything about your septic field, still there, but suddenly the Department of Health is saying, no, you cannot do it that way anymore. Well, we should also think, is there a way of even thinking outside the box? Is there a way even of thinking further outside the box? That means maybe the soil over there is not really appropriate for a septic field. Maybe it would be over there where the soil is more appropriate for that, or really think outside the box. That means why not to have a cluster system where you have 8-10 houses that are linked to a septic field in the open space that is owned by the homeowner association. In New Brunswick, we are talking, I forgot to mention about water well also is the same issue. Okay, in New Brunswick, for non-conventional design of septic system, of course, the installation, they're going to ask you to have a licensed installer for that. And the design itself needs to have an engineer that is going to give the okay for the system itself. Well, it's fine if the costs are not too high. Okay, now we have also to change our idea about septic systems, individual septic system. The conventional one is always that concrete box, and people are thinking, my goodness, it seems that there are other systems that exist in North America, and there are several ones. We have to open our mind. Aeration system, peat filter, effluent distribution system, intermittent sand filter, evapotranspiration system, constructed wetlands, sand mounds, drip spray irrigation. Is there a way we can use some of these systems that are already in existence in North America that could come in our communities? And here we have to see if it's appropriate for the subdivision that we're going to have with the property that we want to subdivide. Now, when you want to have a sustainable community that is going to be built, you will have also to deal with stormwater management. And we're going to talk briefly about the best management practices for LID, which is low impact design. And first of all, we have to look at conservation, minimizing the runoff, slowing and minimizing the travel time, storing the runoff, and pollution prevention. And here, there's a sequence to respect. And what does it mean? Just to give you an example, at Le Village Jean du Ruisseau, what we did we look at, first of all, conservation, and it was, well, preserve vegetation. And preserving vegetation, 76% of the property itself has been preserved. So the second one was, okay, having smaller pipes and disconnection. And why not, I mean, also to have the possibility of gathering the water that is coming on the side in constructed wetland and detention pond. And we had for an objective here that was quite interesting. It was every drop of water that comes on that side has to be treated before it's released in the environment, okay? Treated on the side, that's what it means. Also cutting curbs and narrowing streets and having the water that is coming naturally to be treated naturally before it's released in the environment too. Now, when we are looking at gray infrastructure, we're talking also, why not, I mean, to link it with green infrastructure. And I'm going to have here an interesting question for all of us. What is the cheapest way to have the buy-in of the community for our subdivision that is out of the ordinary? And you have the hint here, with kids. And it's exactly what we did. We involved the people of grade 7, for example, in that subdivision itself. And we went to see them. I mean, you can see even, I mean, the builder here, Charles Poirier, that was talking to kids, and I was also involved with the kids. And we were able to show them, okay, why not, I mean, for you to design an ecological park for the green space, because we're going to have quite a green space over there. And he said, yeah, okay, we're going to do it. And they were really on board. They made a presentation to council, city of Dieppe at the time, and they had 3 themes. They were talking about relaxation and meeting, learn about nature, and exercising. And they provided their ideas to council. The media were there. You bet, I mean, that the media, they were quite outstanding, and the council too. And it's typical of kids. I mean, I never thought about that. The pistes, the bâtisses, green paths, labyrinths, even over there. I was thinking, wow, okay, these kids, I mean, are not afraid of giving their ideas. And why not, I mean, to bring these people on board when you want to build a subdivision that is outside the box. When you are talking about parks and green space, if you're going to provide a certain green space, you bet, I mean, that there will be some organization that will start to be on board and say, why not to regenerate? Why not to have the biodiversity to be improved after all the stress that the biodiversity had to take with the subdivision that came in this area? And the group Littoral Vie from University of Moncton did exactly that. They were involved, and if you go and see that subdivision nowadays, it's going to be quite interesting what you're going to see over there, and it's an improvement compared to what it was when it was just finished after the subdivision was built. Incorporate also community garden, and urban agriculture should always be in our mind. Here it is. It was a vacant area at Marysville Place here in Fredericton, and we were involved, I mean, in designing a community garden over there to have people on board. And why not, I mean, to put it with your subdivision? Make it sure that if you're going to have a space, a green space, why not, I mean, to do it also with urban agriculture in mind? When you have your bike path, your pedestrian paths that are going to be developed for your area, now you should think about linking all of them. The bike path here was linked to the one that was already in existence for the city of Dieppe. And if you go there, you're going to see how it works. And the integration of all these designs should also be part of your subdivision. And here, think about energy efficiency measures in place that you would like me to bring with your subdivision, increasing the neighborhoods interaction, for people to have more interaction for each other, how they can do it. I mean, could it be with linear rain garden? Could it be with small parks that are going to provide that type of interaction? Transit-oriented development, road diets, complete streets, always keeping that in mind when you're when you're taking your property and you would like me to do something that is outside the box. The integration of the design elements, we developed that kind of process of 15 steps that are basically sequential. Basically, so you start basically by knowing your community first, so knowing your site, selling the idea, defining your preconditions, determining your partnership, and after that, I mean, you have a 4 steps process that is pre-application discussion, site analysis plan, conceptual preliminary plan, and there's a 4-step design process that talks about defining the green space, house location, linking the houses all together, and after that, I mean, the lot lines. It's a process. It's a kind of a workshop. We're going to talk about that during the workshop in February next year. Rezoning and legal instrument is they are important also to consider, and you should have the proper instrument under the Community Planning Act. You should also think about integrating parks and urban agriculture, integrating all the relevant design elements and workshops that you're going to have with the people of your community. And you could have different workshops, and you take the best ideas and you are going to integrate it with your subdivision itself. Benefits and profits, of course, I mean, the sales of units is going to come, because the plus value is going to be determined when people are going to see how good it looks. Restoration of biodiversity, I talked about that with the group Littoral Lévis, for example, at Le Village-en-Haut-Ruisseau. It was one group that was involved with that. And of course, I mean, when you finish something like that, use it as an example where you're going to facilitate also the implementation elsewhere in your community. Okay, now the questions we should ask when we want to build outside the box. These questions are pretty interesting, that we should keep that in mind. Do we have, I mean, the possibility of having a sustainable approach for the development for the subdivision itself? Can we protect the natural space? Can we increase the density in subdivision? Can we encourage mixed land use, build roads, streets with light traffic, offering places for gardening and recreation, building affordable housing with the project, offering options for transportation and accessibility to destinations, building safer neighborhoods, offering sites for socialization, and having amenities, facilities for knowledge workers, offering quality health care, and benefiting from energy efficiency measures. I put in bracket here the sessions where you can find some information on that. Of course, because we're constrained by time, you don't have a very detailed information on that, but it gives you an idea of where we're going with that, and it's going to help you to really implement something that is going to be outside the box in your on your property. Okay, now I'm going to stop here just to tell you that the next one we're going to have, it's going to be January 17th, the next session, and it's going to be on protection of the natural environment and also the provision of the best return on investment. That means a dollar figure here. We're going to talk about that, and it's going to be pretty interesting. I'm pretty sure that people will find it quite interesting. Yes, do you have any questions at this point? But before we go there, if you're interested to pursue with an SCD approach or Sustainable Community Design approach, feel free just to get in touch with me. It's going to be my pleasure to work with you and to see how we can go and move forward with the project in your community. And thank you very much. At this point, I'll leave the floor to Eddie. Just a second, I'm going to stop sharing here.
Thank you, Danielle.
Okay.
And on January 17th, we hope to provide a preview of the interactive workshop that will be held in February.
Yep.
So, but before we conclude, I'd love to answer any questions, any comments or questions on the floor. I see none in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question for Danielle. Jens?
Yeah, hello.
Yeah.
I've designed a cluster development such as you've been describing in the Halifax area, and I'd like to hear everybody, but those best able to do so, to talk about consumer resistance to the idea of what, in terms of land tenure, becomes the bare land condominium form of ownership. Such that there be common areas and then each individual lots, as you've illustrated. Could you speak on consumer resistance, please, and how to deal with that with a less knowledgeable buying public?
It's an excellent question. My goodness. What you're mentioning here is basically, is it going to be possible to implement it or not? If the public is against anything that is new, of course, I mean, it's going to be conventional to the yin yang, and it's not what we want. What we noticed that was really amazing, the soft approach with the kids really make a difference. We were really surprised. Well, I shouldn't be surprised, but I mean, it surprised us. Okay. So having the kids involved, I know it takes time from us. I mean, as professional, I mean, we say, oh, we don't have enough time to go and see a school and go be involved with the project. Well, it provides dividends at the end. What is happening is the kids that get involved, we show them where we can go with that. And yes, I mean, it was 3 sessions that I had to do with them. And the fourth one, when they went to see the council and provided their feedback, and we were involved with the media, I mean, the buy-in was all there. And it was so amazing at that point that when we started to build, the people that were starting to be at phase 1 of the project, I remember that we tried to invite them because the minister would cut the ribbon at the time. It was the first time, I mean, minister would cut the ribbon for a subdivision. And one of the guy, we rang at the door and he answered us. He said, do you know about that subdivision? I wanted him to say something about the fact that we were part of the team that designed the subdivision. And he said, it's one of the best subdivision that we ever had. And he said, it's called Sustainable Community Design. And he was trying to sell it to us. And I found it so amazing because the word of mouth was quite amazing coming from them. And what the guy told us when we said, oh, we would like me to have it more known, and we would like me for more people to come in that subdivision and to be more aware of what is happening. And he said, I hope you're not going to do that. And I was surprised by what he told me. And I said, why do you say that? He said, well, I would like me to have my friends and my family to come in that subdivision. So if you are going to advertise it too much, there will be no place for my friend. So basically, if we look at the soft approach and having people trained to a certain point on what is a conservation subdivision, how it works, being in the news to a certain extent, community TV, name it. I mean, whatever you can do in order to provide information for people to be more aware of what is possible, it's going to have an impact, I'm sure. Is it okay? Do you need me to expand on something else? Because I can.
Would I be allowed one supplementary point?
Sure.
Part of the issue that I ran into, or I should say the property developer ran into, is had the misfortune, not naming any names, but to pick a realtor to market the lots. A realtor who was very skeptical and quite frankly hostile to the whole idea about an association or a condominium board operating and being responsible for those common services. So that's another audience that needs to be addressed for anybody who's going to try to move this forward, especially in a small community. Because a realtor honestly turned out to be a real rock in the river in that case.
Yeah. Our experience with real estate agents here in New Brunswick has been to train them, because we realized that if they are not trained, these guys, are not going to be geared for selling something that is outside the box. Okay. So we were able, it was with the province of New Brunswick at the time, we had a link with the real estate association, one of the real estate, I don't remember which one it was, but sorry me for that. But these guys, they took it at heart. They understood where we wanted to go with that. And they have to have credit learning, these guys, okay, every year. So in order for them to get a credit learning, they had to take the training. And it was interesting that we were able to do the link with them, showing them where we're going to go with that. Now, I know, it has been many years ago, but if it's something that we can do again, and it should be regularly that the information is going to come, it's going to make a difference. It's going to be one project at a time. What I notice also from the people that are attending these sessions, these people are also thinking, okay, I should visit, for example, Le Village en Haut-Ruisseau, just to see how it looks. And having also field trip that are going to help people to see it's a real case. You can see the difference. And people are quite amazed sometimes by what they see.
Thanks, Jens. Thanks, Danielle. Any other questions? If you want to unmute yourself or put your hand up. Okay, silence is going on. I'll ask my colleague Helda to launch the resulting poll, and we'll be sending you the invitation for our next session in January and providing a preview at that time of the exercise in February. It will take into account a lot of the
before I'm going to be muted, I guess. I would like me to thank the people that are here, because these people show that they want to do something different than what has been the conventional way of doing it. And kudos for you guys. I'm very, very pleased that you're thinking outside the box. You want to bring something that is going to make a difference in your community. And we have to work all together. If we work all together, you bet that we can make a difference. So thank you.
Still waiting for folks to answer the poll. Thanks, Danielle. And we'll be providing a list of principles that we've been covering over these 4 sessions. So things that you'll want to consider during the exercise. And to give you kind of just a short preview, it will involve an interactive mural and map exercise where you will be designing your own sustainable conservation subdivision. And I'd also like to extend our thanks for all the participants today. We will be sending the recording and the presentation of today's session.
You're
welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Helda. You can stop recording.